If nothing else, I can say I didn't dislike Green Book as much as I was expecting to dislike it based on the trailers and the general premise. You can put about 99% of that on the actors, I suspect, as what enjoyment there was to be derived was found in savoring two of our better performers doing the extremely heavy lifting of turning a pair of Hallmark-level middlebrow caricatures into three-dimensional persons without sacrificing the cartoonishly broad conception of them that remains the point of the project, one assumes. It's the sort of softball award season pablum where, in my circles at least, you mostly come away grateful that you won't have to bite your tongue too hard when your relatives are telling you how much they loved it at Thanksgiving. From the onset, what made Green Book, for the record, the title refers to a travel guide published for African Americans in the segregation era, essentially laying out how to make your way from place to place in the southern U.S. via Negro-friendly establishments and also without getting victimized by legally protected and forced racial violence, looked like a somewhat dire prospect with its nakedly Stanley Kramerish social issues through an uplifting lens for white progressive setup. Hardscrabble New York City blue-collar Italian doofus Tony Vallelonga, played by Viggo Mortensen, is hired to drive Mahershala Ali as black classical piano virtuoso Don Shirley on his early 1960s concert tour through the Deep South, during which a contentious but nuanced friendship develops between the two very different men that, yes, challenges Tony's atypical racial prejudices, but also, wouldn't you just know it, shows how we're actually not all that different, and maybe the eccentric, sophisticated Don has some prejudices he could stand to confront, too. The appeal to Hollywood's and, let's be honest, America's preferred narrative about racism, it's bad, but it mostly happened in the past because good white people who could be educated got over it and helped thwart the bad white people who could not, and also black people should participate in a conversation about this, thank the good white people for being good white people, and admit that various dissimilar hardships are also bad, and thus we're really all the same, right? Was obvious on its face, but what becomes immediately clear and immeasurably more tiring is the realization that what must have made Green Book, based on a true story as related to Mr. Vallelonga's son, disputed on some details by Dr. Shirley's family, looks so irresistible in 2018 is its ability to function as a too clever by half allegory for the supposed lessons of the 2016 presidential election, vis-a-vis Obama backlash by the white working class being more about rebuking hoity-toity big city elitism than racism, and moreover that classism and or working class unity more pressing concerns anyhow. Within this conceit, the broad strokes of Don Shirley's character make him an almost too appropriate proto-Obama figure, a wealthy, highly educated eccentric whose apartment is laid out as ornately as that of Dr. Strange. He confronts Tony's job interview seated in a literal throne and makes no attempt to hide his disdain for his would-be valet's working-class Goomba diction, nor the fact that he's pointedly hiring him because he needs a discreetly dirty thug. Tony is a mob-adjacent bouncer and knockaround guy to protect him in the Jim Crow South, in part because his world-traveling music, art, and psychology studies have left him in some ways even more disconnected from ordinary black American culture than he is white America. He's never eaten fried chicken, and yes, that's a whole scene. In fact, Tony knows black popular music, how to handle himself in a black bar, and wouldn't you know it, gets on with the mostly black waiters, cleaners, and other drivers at the venues easily because, hey, being broke and working for the swells ain't got no color, am I right? Green Book, of course, mostly comes down on the am right side of that equation, which is a take, certainly. To be fair, there's adequate, if a bit too baseline, to qualify as admirable nuance to be found in the expected beats wherein the harsh realities of real racism, combined with Shirley being something like a Superman of pianos and teaching him how to use romantic metaphors so his love letters home to his wife are better, teach Tony that his lower-key racism needs to go away. But if you were thinking that the film would manage to avoid a scene where the characters angrily shout the messages of the film at one another, or find the way to make sure that we know that Tony is also an exceptional man of his time somehow, well, think again. At one point, Shirley gets into trouble with some dangerous cops, not for his race this time, but for being caught in a tryst with another man. When Tony upbraids him for going out unprotected, he informs him that he'd assumed he wouldn't want to know he was working for a gay man. But surprise, Tony is actually very ahead of his time on this subject because, hey, he works in New York clubs and he knows life is complicated, you know? Wouldn't you just know it? Gee, maybe Don should examine some of his assumptions and prejudices, huh? And even though racism is bad, maybe it's also bad to wall yourself off from it behind internationalism and academia, lest you lose touch with the common salt-of-the-earth values that unite us all and will only make flyover, or in this case, drive carefully through country resent you more, right? Like I said, this should all be insufferable, and yet outside the more egregious, think about it, won't you, moments that mostly hums along about as smoothly as what boils down to My Cousin Vinny teaches Carlton Banks to get his blackness back probably can under the circumstances. And however treacly the family, that's what really matters finale you'll see coming the moment the mechanism to bring it about comes into play ends up feeling earned, once again, mostly because Mortensen and Ali are both better than the material, but also just enough so that they don't let you see that they probably know that. It's not a great film, and it feels like it's from about 30 years ago, and within 5 years from now it'll probably feel like it's from the Bronze Age, but for now at least you could do a lot worse for Trump-era white reassurance racism movies, and unfortunately we'll probably have to.